For this meeting of the Raleigh City Council, first item we have on the agenda is Pastor Richard Thrash from Millennium. Hi, how are you? He's going to give the invocation.
Yes, thank you. Let us pray. Father God, we thank you for today. We thank you for the city of Raleigh. We thank you for our leadership. I'm asking today that you will lead us and guide us as we prepare for the future of Raleigh, as we seek your guidance and your counsel in this meeting today. We ask that you will allow us to have open eyes and open ears and open hearts to continue to operate in oneness as we prepare for a greater Raleigh in this millennial age. And we thank you. Amen.
Amen. Mr. Cox, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I have a couple of certificates of appointments. Colleen Sullins. Colleen, oh, there she is. Colleen has agreed to accept appointment by the Raleigh City Council to serve a 2-year term on the Environmental Advisory Board. So thank you so much. We appreciate you donating your time and talents. You can say something if you want, but you don't have to. Okay, thank you very much. And Mark Turner. There he is. Hey, Mark. Mark has agreed to accept appointment by the Raleigh City Council to serve a 2-year term on Historical Resources and Museums Advisory Board. So thank you very much, Mark, for donating your time. Okay, thanks. Okay, and now I have a special proclamation for Ashley Christensen. Yeah, woo! Ashley, come on down. So I just want to say Ashley won the James Beard Award for best chef ever in the entire universe, right? I think that was the official title. And I was out sick during that time, but I watched her acceptance speech and was very moved by not only the things she said, but the way she acknowledged her staff. And that's the reason for the name of the proclamation. So here's the proclamation. Whereas food brings people together, providing comfort, accompanying celebration, and making ordinary days memorable, and whereas people have enjoyed Ashley Christensen's comfort food classics and French-infused techniques for 2 decades, and whereas Ashley Christensen's 6 restaurants in Raleigh are Raleigh icons, drawing residents and visitors alike to downtown and surrounding areas, and whereas Ashley Christensen and AC Restaurants contribute greatly to the local economy and employ hundreds of people affectionately termed badasses, and whereas since making Raleigh her home, Ashley Christensen has sought to foster community through food, philanthropy, and the stimulation of downtown neighborhoods. Whereas Ashley Christensen is recognized around the world as an innovative chef and business owner and has received 2 James Beard Awards, including being named 2019 James Beard Outstanding Chef. Now, therefore, do I, Nancy McFarland, Mayor of the City of Raleigh, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2019 in the City of Raleigh as Ashley Christensen Badass Month.
I just want to say that this is my favorite city in the entire world. It's my greatest honor to employ over 300 people in this great city, and I thank everyone here in this room across the city for working hard every day on behalf of the future of small businesses and our amazing city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashley. Appreciate it. Okay. And for the clerk, Ms. Crowder is absent and excused. Okay, that takes us to the consent agenda. I have one item that staff has requested to be pulled, L1. That will come back at a later time. Is there any other items anyone wishes pulled from the consent agenda? Okay,
Move
seeing
for-
none, do I have a motion to
Move for
approve?
approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That takes us to the report and recommendation of the Planning Commission.
Good afternoon. We'll start, as we always do, with a preview of coming attractions. What's currently calendared for November 6th evening public hearing. It's a lot, and we'll be recommending that this list get even longer.
Great.
With 3 items reported out from Planning Commission. So, first of these is TC 618. This is the cottage court text change. You may recall that this has been in process for a while. It was referred to the Planning Commission with a desire to amend the standards to not only allow increased density in cottage courts, but also allow the option of fee simple lots where you would own the land under the unit in addition to the unit itself. The Planning Commission did take that up in your agenda packet. They had an involved discussion of this over several text change committee meetings where they involved various stakeholders, and they have recommended a number of enhancements and amendments to the ordinance. I won't read through them all, but they are listed in your agenda item. And therefore, they have now unanimously recommended its approval, and staff is suggesting a public hearing date of November 6th.
Okay?
All right, move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Next item is Comprehensive Plan Amendment CP 1019, Falls North Corridor Plan. This is a request to add a Parkway Corridor designation to Falls of Neuse Road and Raven Ridge Road. This was requested by Councilmember Cox as part of the adoption process for the Falls North Area Plan. Planning Commission has recommended approval on a 6-2 vote with a minor modification of the extent. They recommend the designation on Raven Ridge Road extend between Moose Creek Drive and the Falls River Plan Development District, and that was related to existing built conditions and some commentary that was received at the public meeting. Staff has recommended a November 6th public hearing date.
Okay, in the agenda, it says staff recommends December 3rd.
We have, there was a staff error in the agenda, printed agenda packet, and at this point, we're recommending November 6th.
Do you? Okay, I'm just looking at the list.
Was that on your list that we saw a moment ago?
No, these are all things that are being added.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And last item is TCZ 319. This is a petition to amend a condition. This relates to 3800 Glenwood Place. This is an office park that is currently undergoing redevelopment in a more mixed-use direction. The conditions on this case date to 2005. They were applied when the zoning on the property was office and institutional. During the remapping, it was changed to OX7 to reflect the built condition. As a result, there is a desire to amend a condition that relates to the maximum size of a commercial tenant within the office building. Essentially, the OX limitations on retail uses would apply and would be somewhat more liberal than the current condition, which limits those tenants to 3,000 square feet maximum. Planning Commission reviewed this and has unanimously recommended approval, and a public hearing date of November 6th is recommended.
Okay. I'm just wondering if we should move any of these to the second. I mean, I realize it would be a day meeting, but do you have a general idea on the next 2 items? Do you think it will
So
be,
the last item is city initiated.
Yeah.
There's no applicant waiting in the wings or impatient about its progress through the process. So, and it's a text change.
Okay.
Mayor, I'd like to see them both moved.
Okay.
The first meeting in November is always a long, very long day for us, so I think if we split it up, it might be a little bit better.
Okay, so the TC 319 and TC 1119 put on the 19th?
November 19th.
TC 1219?
No, TC, the last two. 319 and 1219, yeah, and 1219.
TCC 3. Great.
Put those on the 19th.
Okay.
Is that your motion?
Is that a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
You go to December? Sorry, the applicant has just requested that could that go to the December hearing, public
Which
hearing?
one?
Which one?
TCZ 319.
The Glenwood Avenue?
Yes.
That's fine, to go to December? Okay.
Okay.
Do
Move for TCZ 319 to be moved to December 3rd.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll have 319 will be on December 3rd.
And then the last is a text change, TC 1219, Unsafe Building Code. This is an amendment to the UDO that would essentially expand our authority to match statutorily granted authority to deal with unsafe, dilapidated buildings within areas that the council declares to be community development target areas based on the statutory criteria. Planning Commission reviewed this and has unanimously recommended approval. And again, you could set the hearing for
I think that was in
December.
his motion.
That was in the motion?
He's already included
Okay,
that
so
in
we're
his
good.
motion for November.
Terrific. You've already covered it. Then the Planning Commission report is now complete. Thank you.
Okay, thank you
you.
very much. Okay, that takes us to the report and recommendation of the city manager.
Or perhaps special items?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right. The first item under special items is staff's follow-up to questions related to the Police Oversight Board community engagement. Audrey Caesar is here to make a brief update presentation. As you may recall, the council had requested some additional detail on meeting locations and what topics would be discussed at the community outreach. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Caesar.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
So back on May 21st, 3 options for police oversight boards was presented. First, you had the oversight board, which was more about investigation, disciplinary actions, and subpoena power. The second was the police review board, which was an advisory board looking at case review and recommendations. And then the third option was the Office of Citizen Advocacy, which is an internal office that takes complaints from residents. Council identified 2 next steps. The first was to explore an enhanced internal affairs process and then to conduct a community engagement process to obtain resident feedback. We're focusing on 2, and so we presented that information on September 3rd. So this is the follow-up to the September 3rd presentation, where we were asked to add an additional location to cover all districts, to provide an agenda, and then list the roundtable topics for discussion.
Can I interrupt you just a second? So is the discussion, and I wasn't here in May when they made the decision to do this, is the discussion about all 3 of those potential, the first slide you showed? So
Right.
that,
So let me I can jump to that now. So there will be roundtable discussions, and it actually would make sense, let me back up to the agenda, and then I can take you through
Okay,
this
that's fine, that's
specifically. Okay. So the locations are listed here. As you can see, we've added locations to hit every single district.
and why do we have 2 in District C?
Those were just the preferred locations.
That's not
So why
what
do we
we had
have
asked for before.
2 in District C, 2
Yes.
meetings, as opposed to 1 in every district? Why do we have 2 meetings in District C?
I think we were trying to get coverage in certain areas.
Well, I'm in District A, so if you're going to do that for District C, you need to do that for District A or B or C or whatever. I think that's not necessary. 1 in each district is what we had originally asked for.
Okay,
I mean,
we
this
can
looks,
select one.
this doesn't look right to me. If you're going to do this, make it fair.
So the overall concern is just the fact that because there's 2 there,
Yes,
back,
yes.
because that was presented last time, and I know there were some changes made, because I know for District B, I think it was actually Green Road. But, I think, honestly, just with the conversation and everything, I hear your concerns and everything, and this was presented. At the end of the day, it's a council decision, but I think what's listed will actually give fair coverage, just based on the scale of the city.
The scale of the city? I've
Well,
got more people living in District A than we do in C.
Madam Mayor, can I
Yeah, Mr.
comment? So, hear what you're saying about everybody having the same opportunity to speak. My sense is that there probably will be more people in District C who have strong and heartfelt and legitimate concerns here, and that I think that is, and I'm not going to speak for staff, but my sense is you're trying to be responsive to your best judgment of how to make sure that people in areas that have more concerns have more opportunities to express those concerns, so that at the end of the day, people who have strong concerns will have a great opportunity to express those concerns and bring back to us or to the new council the best feedback. So I would prefer to leave it like it is and respect staff's judgment on how to structure this to get the best feedback.
Yeah, as long, the whole purpose of this is that if we're going to have this, then folks are going to have an opportunity. I don't want it to come back to this council saying, we had so many hundred people and come back. It could be skewed. I mean, if District C is where the most vocal people have been about this oversight board, and then the folks in District A might not be feeling the same way. So if you have two meetings, you're going to get twice as much input.
Well, not necessarily. I think the thing too is just because it's in a district, and I think this was brought up at our last meeting, it's in a district doesn't prohibit you from attending a meeting. And this gives the citizens, those that may not be able to have an opportunity to attend a meeting on a certain night, that chance to attend the meeting. And that's how I look at it. And, as far as location, I think the location looks at geographics, but also if someone can't if someone in District A can't make the meeting on the 12th, and a lot of these are back to back, they might be able to make that meeting on a Thursday, because that's the only meeting listed that's on a Thursday on the 21st, and they may attend that meeting. So that's how I look at it. Those that parts of the city have an opportunity, because actually of those citizens that have come before us, a lot of them actually live in District B instead of C that have actually come before us.
I'm just looking for a fair process.
I understand.
So I understand your concern about it quantitatively being skewed, and I just trust staff to be able to make it clear to people that, maybe there is a numerical analysis of how many cared about this and how many cared about that, but at the end of the day, I think it's really the qualitative information we get back from this that's going to be of value. And if there is any quantitative analysis, it can indicate that there were two meetings in this area, so you can, whatever you feel like you need to do, divide that number by 2 or whatever it is. But I think what we're really after is the qualitative information, and since most of the qualitative concerns are in C, let's make sure we get all of those qualitative concerns into the conversation.
Yeah, and not to get ahead of if you may be covering this, and if you are going to, just stop me. But I guess I'd like to know the mechanism of how you're going to get this information.
I think it's coming in the presentation, isn't it?
Right, and when you say mechanism, you mean what's going to be presented?
Well presented, and also how are you going to quantify this information that you get from hearing folks?
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say I agree with the points that Russ has made, and think it's perfectly fine to have 2 and C.
Why don't you go ahead and finish the presentation?
Thank you. Okay, so each session will be hosted by the Human Relations Commission. We're going to have the welcome, refreshments, and some instructions where we establish ground rules for everyone participating. 6:15 to 6:30, we're going to present the exact same presentation that was presented on May 21st. So folks who come can see the entire presentation. And from there, we're going to move on to roundtable discussions. At that point, once the roundtable discussions are completed, there's going to be a representative from each table to stand up and give the key points from that discussion. And then we're going to follow that with a large group debrief where folks, if they have additional questions about the plan, they can ask it then. If they have other feedback, they can ask it at that time. In addition to verbally sharing information, we're going to have opportunities for folks to write down the information or write down questions or things that are of interest to them, and we're going to put it up on the wall to put together a packet of key themes and then a full packet of responses. So quote by quote. So you'll have an opportunity to see exactly what residents said. In the roundtable, the next is to have residents describe the goal of a police review board. So if you are in favor, describe what you think the goal is of this review board and what you hope for it to accomplish. And then specifically going back to the presentation, do any of these options make sense for Raleigh? So we'll get resident feedback on these points.
All right, this is what I was trying to ask. When your second question, does Raleigh need a review board? Are you talking about the other? There were three options. One was a community engagement board. I mean, there were other two. When your question is, do you need a review board, it sounds like you're excluding those other options.
So when we use the term review board, and we're using it collectively, we can change that to review board model and ask them to describe. But one of the things I don't want to do is limit the public and say, hey, these are the only three options. If they have, does Raleigh need something to address police oversight is really how we can reword the question to be all-encompassing, but also give folks the opportunity to share more if they have other ideas.
Okay.
And I think the last question pretty much says it to me that you're looking at all these or anything else. So yeah, if review board is a tricky word, then it could be a review function, advisory function, or
Sure.
whatever it needs to be to make it clear we're not trying to pick one up front.
Yes, just something that opens the door for people to give options that may not be listed.
Logistical question. I honestly don't know if this is the order you're going to be asking folks these questions, but it might be worth switching number 2 and number 3 to get, like, here's your ideal community, what's the goal of what we're doing, and then do we need one?
Yes.
Just to kind of get folks in that thought pattern.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I see that.
Okay.
Okay, so in terms of next steps, we just need guidance from you all on what you see as our next move.
Questions.
Yes.
Will you be recording these sessions, and the presentation that we'll be giving, will you be recording the presentation in advance and making it available on the website?
Yes, we can record. The plan is to record all of the sessions, and we can make the sessions available on the website. And actually, one of the plans was to have similar opportunities for folks to provide that qualitative feedback. So in terms of a survey, you can watch the video and maybe have 1 to 3 questions about what your thoughts are on the plans presented.
Okay.
And when will you plan on bringing this back to the council?
So at the conclusion of all of the meetings, we move into Thanksgiving and then we move into Christmas time. So realistically speaking, it's going to be end of December, early January with the feedback from the sessions.
Okay. So I have a couple questions. One is sort of what Mr. Thompson was alluding to. And we saw this when we had our community conversations. Oftentimes we had a small group that attended every meeting. So if you have 5 people that come to 5 meetings, how is that 5 pieces of input, not 25 pieces of input?
Right, so for the folks that do attend the meeting, there will be a sign-in sheet. You're going to indicate what district, you're going to indicate your address and that information. We can make that announcement that we don't want to duplicate information. So if you've been to one meeting, that means we've captured your thoughts and ideas. It's not necessary to attend multiple meetings.
Okay, I also would assume that these are, much like the community conversations that we had, something truly for the community, that if a council member chooses to go, they would be there and observing not a participatory role, but in an observational role.
Yes.
You know, this whole, I obviously wasn't here when this whole thing was planned. I still have serious reservations about this process because I really feel that, you know, the small but very vocal group of people that continually are calling for this are sort of driving this. I don't know how you get the feedback from people that don't think we need this to, you know, make really, that's really a call for the council. I mean, about making an informed decision. I personally think that I am concerned about the message that this sends to our police officers who have a very difficult job, and you know, the things they deal with every day are beyond most of our comprehensions, and I don't like sending them the message that we don't fully support them. And that's my concerns with this whole process.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mayor. I think, I've been on the record, I'm not in favor of this. I do think that it undermines our police department. But, you know, even though we've had this discussion at the table here a few moments ago about trying to make it as fair as possible, I still don't think that, I really would like to make sure that we get these numbers and addresses and things of people, because they will be going, this is the same group that has disrupted our meetings, their boorish behavior, their failure to follow our rules of decorum, and yet I feel like this council at times is knuckling under these folks to try to appease them. I don't believe in appeasing bad behavior. And I believe that our police department does a good job. I do think we have procedures will be coming back when I am gone and others at this table. But I would like to think that this council will look at it from an objective standpoint and not just to appease a certain group of people.
I don't see this as an appeasement. I think our police force does an excellent job, and they work better city as we grow, and working with a lot of times we have this conversation, we keep talking about our citizens. I think to, you know, making sure our police officers are also involved in this process. I think that's how we have a better conversation, a better city, of making sure that everyone's involved in this process. And any citizen is welcome to come to these meetings and share their thoughts and opinions, and looking at best practices from other cities, cities that are larger than us, that have had, you know, these for a while, and some that don't have one. I think, you know, at the end of the day, there are some citizens that feel this is needed, and there's some that feel this is not needed. I've heard both sides over the last 4 months and 3 years. So I think this is our step, when this was done originally in May, to say, okay, you know, instead of just hearing from those that come to the chamber, let's go to the community. And that's where this came from. So that we weren't making a decision just from those that were coming to the chamber. And that was the intent while I was here, you know, in the pleasure of, you know, running the meetings. That was my thought.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think the overall goal here is not to make just one group safer, although that's important to make every group safer, and that includes our first responders. And so there's, you know, I think that to the extent that previous meetings have not been decorous, I think that's a reflection of a sense that there hasn't been a fair and transparent and open process. And I have high hopes. Sorry to lay it all on staff here now, that folks will be engaged in a way that makes them feel like their voice is being heard. The simple fact is minority populations are the ones who are being shot disproportionately, and so it seems very natural that they would be the ones who would be most interested in coming up with a solution that fixes that problem. And so I think it's it's not unique thing, and I think there's, again, the outcome of it for me is going to be one that's better for everyone. If we see that we're having these kinds of disparate impacts on some populations versus another, and if we really want to be a great city, we've all got to come together on that.
And two last points I want to make is one is that the majority now of African Americans in Raleigh actually don't live in District C. They live throughout the entire city. So I don't want this to just think that this is just District C. And two, I want us, as much time and energy we're spending on this, let's also look at gun violence and what we can do to address the number of shootings and homicides that we've had in our city. Because, you know, that's another issue that I don't think we're spending enough time on. So that's the other thing I'm pushing and pressing that we work with, and hopefully we can work with our Human Relations Commission on how we can address gun violence in the city of Raleigh.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
that's my last two comments.
Okay. Do you need any action from us on this? No, it's just the information.
The mayor and council had already previously directed us to do the work, so
Right.
we're going forward. You just asked for additional level of detail. So I guess unless there's any different direction, we are moving forward with what's proposed in front of you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Next item is soccer entertainment facility feasibility update. As you may recall, during the interlocal agreement associated with hospitality taxes, there was a discussion associated with that to conduct a feasibility study on a soccer and entertainment complex in partnership with Wake County. So Rafael Batista with our Office of Economic Development and Innovation is here to provide you an update, as well as just some reminders on the timeline associated with some other project solicitations in that interlocal agreement. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Batista to make the presentation.
Thank you, Ruffin. Madam Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to be here. As you all may recall, later this summer, you approved and gave some direction on our hospitality tax interlocal funding and some steps moving forward. So today I want to give you an update on 3 of those items that came out of those conversations with the approval of the City Council and Board of County Commissioners. So the first 2 items will be informational only items, so there'll be no necessary action from you on those items. And the third item, we will have a recommended motion and some action that we will need. But today I'll be talking about our medium-sized project competitive process RFP, our multi-purpose indoor sports complex competitive process RFP, and our soccer stadium feasibility study. Just a note, this is a joint effort between the city and the county, so I'll address who's kind of taking lead on each one. And the Board of County Commissioners received a similar presentation yesterday at their afternoon meeting. So for a medium-sized project competitive process RFP, this is part of the interlocal funding. It was approved as part of the 21st Amendment. City Council and the County Commissioners unanimously approved $46.6 million in funding for the medium-sized projects. This is a competitive process. It will have an RFP that will be jointly conducted by the city and county, with the county taking lead on this project. The goal here is to provide capital funding to support a medium-sized total capital project cost of greater than $20 million. It's a process that's open to any project that meets the minimum criteria. The basic criteria is the project has to be fully located within Wake County, and it has to be consistent with the statutory uses of revenues. Essentially what that means is that the project needs to increase tourism revenue within Wake County or increase the amount of hotel bed nights used in Wake County. And then for each project, the hospitality funding portion of it can be no more than 45% of the project cost. So the project backer has to be able to put in at least 55% of the project cost, and the interlocal funding will not cover more than 45% of it. So a little bit about the process and timeline. The anticipation is that in early December we'll be releasing the RFP, and the goal is to come back in March of 2020 with recommendations to both the Board of County Commissioners and to the Raleigh City Council. So what will happen is once the RFP comes in, a cross-collaborative team of city staff, county staff, and community stakeholders are going to review all the proposals. They'll score them, and then they'll develop a set of recommendations around funding that will be brought back to the Board of County Commissioners and to City Council for final approval. So approval will be made by both governing boards. So that's the medium-sized projects.
So that's a one-time, no reoccurring funding, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
I'll help you out on that. Yes, the answer is yes.
So the next item is the multi-purpose indoor sports complex competitive process. So this is again part of the 21st Amendment interlocal funding, looking at about $2.35 million annually, leveraging around $35 million worth of debt. The background here was this was a recommendation from the 2018 Destination Strategic Plan done by the GLL group, conducted by the Visitors Bureau. So this will be another competitive process jointly conducted by the city and county, again with the county taking lead on this one. The idea here was to create an indoor sports complex with a minimum of 100,000 square feet. It's multi-use, and we'll have the ability to hold youth and amateur events and tournaments to make sure we can bring in that tourism revenue there. A little bit on the timeline here. This is the one that will be kind of completed first from the process perspective. So the RFP will be released in late October, anticipation coming back in February to the two governing bodies.
So you expect multiple responses to this RFP?
I think we are still in the process of trying to gauge the demand and who will respond.
I would be surprised if you had more than one.
2020 with recommend. Upon review of it, the City Council and Board of County Commissioners did both request a joint feasibility study of the proposed project to better understand the project and what it would mean. So when looking at this, the primary goal of the feasibility study is not to provide recommendations or to provide necessarily a decision, but rather to provide the city and the county with the appropriate analysis and information to make public policy decisions surrounding the proposed stadium. So what you'll see in the next few slides is several things, questions that we want the consultant to provide answers to, and several elements of analysis we want responses to. We're not asking them to recommend if a stadium's a good idea or not. Rather, we're asking them to provide the information where the city and county can make the determination if this is the right thing to pursue. So at a broad level, some of the questions we'll be asking the consultant to answer is, what's the market demand? Is there a demand in the market for a stadium, for a new stadium? Looking at kind of the stadium size, is it the right location? Elements such as that. The ability for the market to bring in sports teams and things like that. Looking at the economic impact of the project. So are we looking at a net positive for tourism revenue, for hospitality taxes, for overall economy? Are we going to see an increase in direct and indirect spending? Trying to understand that. Looking at the impact on other venues, and for the purposes of this conversation, really looking at other publicly managed or financed venues, not just sports venues, but entertainment venues. So that's going to be your Wake Met Soccer Park in Cary, but also Red Hat Amphitheater here, Walnut Creek, Cocoa Booth, the 5-county stadium out in Zebulon, and several other venues. Trying to understand, are these venues going to be harmed, hurt, supported? Is there going to be synergies? What's going to happen to the other venues as we solve this project? We'll also be looking at the consultant to help us understand who are the potential tenants for the stadium, who would be there, who would be the anchors regularly using that stadium. And part of that is understanding what is the potential of this stadium combined with our market to attract a professional soccer team. That could be another potential tenant there. You'll also be looking at the impact on surrounding properties, so looking at kind of the immediate properties, what's going to be the transportation impact, the parking impact, but also will this stadium, based on what happens in other communities and best practices, will this increase market demand for those properties next door? All these questions were developed by doing a full analysis of every feasibility study done for any MLS soccer stadium that's publicly available, as well as any stadium in the second division men's professional soccer teams and the women's professional team. So the 3 potential tenants, we looked at every feasibility study to come up with these questions.
Will you also be looking at communities that have actually moved forward and then eventually lost their teams, for example?
Yeah, we're asking the consultant to look at kind of a peer group, so looking at communities that have a similar profile, so communities with, a second division men's soccer team and a women's professional team. When they built the stadium, what happened? Markets that did get to an MLS team, what happened once the stadium was built, and what was that? So we'll be asking them to look at that.
Right, because I'm from Rochester, New York, and I know they built a soccer stadium, and then recently they lost their team, and now they have an empty stadium.
And if you can also look at the, who owns the surrounding property and some of those items, because I want to say it was Las Vegas, but it may have been another city that received taxpayer money, but the person that owned the stadium owned all the surrounding properties, and nothing was ever developed. It was just surface parking. So I think there's lots of examples around the country where there's further impacts, but.
Yes, ma'am. So a little bit on the process. This is a joint effort between the city and the county on this particular item. The city is taking the lead on this. So what we're recommending is that we enter in a direct contract with the JLL group to do this feasibility study. So a couple of reasons why we're recommending this is, one is the JLL group did the destination strategic plan, so they're intimately knowledgeable of the market. They understand what we're looking for from a tourism and attraction perspective. They're a global company. They've done other stadium projects. So we also think that going in with them, because of their knowledge in the market, they'll be able to hit the ground quicker and get this feasibility study turned around a little quicker. We anticipate, in the motion we'll address this, that the project cost will be no more than $100,000 and take no more than 4 months. So with that, the recommended motion that we're asking for today is to authorize a budget amendment of $100,000 to pay for the stadium feasibility study, with Wake County agreeing to reimburse the city for half the cost. So we are going to pay upfront the cost, and then Wake County will reimburse $50,000 of that $100,000. So,
when will we get that reimbursement?
Brandon, I'll defer to our attorney's office, who is working on that piece.
As we expend the funds, we get reimbursed half with each invoice.
Okay, how many invoices?
We are anticipating, the way we're breaking down the project, we're anticipating receiving invoices from the consultant in 3 phases.
Okay. Approximately monthly then.
Okay, motion?
Very good report. I'd like to make the motion for approval of the funds.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
And I would like to just take a moment to say thank you to Raphael and Economic Development for all the assistance, but we have several other staff groups in finance and the manager's office. And also Wake County has been a very good partner in working through some of the details, so it's been a very good working relationship. So just wanted to say thanks for that.
Okay, I want to actually throw in one more thing since Denny is here. I was just reading about your epic August month where we collected, it was a record, more than $2.9 million in prepared food and beverage and 2.6 in hotel occupancy. So that's very exciting, and we'll see about September with Bluegrass. So congratulations. Appreciate it.
All right, next item on special items, small cell deployments in the city. Daniel King's coming forward from Development Services as he brings up the presentation. As you may recall, we continue to have large amounts of items on the consent agenda for the encroachments, particularly around small cells, because there's an initiative going forward right now. At one of your previous meetings, Council had just asked for a little bit more information about that topic. One thing I will remind the Council of is that this is an environment that's highly regulated outside the city. So we are very limited in what we can specifically do, and I believe the presentation will mention that. But unlike some of your other regulatory environments, a lot of that is preempted by federal and state law, so just wanted to keep that in mind. But we certainly do what we can with the tools in our possession. So with that, Daniel King and Development Services is here to give you a quick update.
Thank you, Ruffin. This presentation does come as a response to a request from the council to provide an update to small cell, small wireless facilities that are commonly known as small cells. So I'll go through a little bit of just a recap of what a small cell really is, We'll talk a little bit about what ability the council and the city as a whole have to regulate certain things and what other agencies regulate, as well as some of what we see on a regular basis coming into the city. So,
Daniel, can you speak more into the mic?
Yes, sir. Is this better? All right. So a traditional cell tower, typically 200 to 400 feet in height, can be placed either rural or urban areas, large signal ranges. These are what we traditionally have seen in the past with cell services. In contrast, the small cells or the small wireless facilities typically are limited to a 50-foot height limit. We typically see them more in the 35 to 40-foot range. They're ideal for urban areas, limited signal range. They can stand alone. They can be co-located on other poles in certain scenarios, although as we'll get into a little later, our ability to regulate that is very limited, but there are some options there. This is just giving you a few examples. On the left side, you'll see some co-located examples of poles on light poles, on some power poles, and then the standalone poles to the right-hand side here. And as you can see, there's a antenna on top of these, and then there's some signal equipment that's mounted on the pole itself lower down. So to give you an idea of kind of what we've got in the hopper, we've got a map here that shows some of the proposed and pre-existing sites. To give you kind of a breakdown, there were 140 permitted locations prior to 2019, and those are all on green on this map. And then there were 138 submittals that are currently in review in different levels of review, and that's the red and the blue. The red indicates a new pole, the blue would be a co-located location. And there's a multi-year deployment model that's being utilized for these as they're coming forward. I spoke a little bit about kind of the limited influence that the city has. So this kind of speaks a little bit to the small cell regulatory environment. There's 3 different entities that really regulate these, the FCC being the largest of those and having the most control. The state of North Carolina and the legislation that they've enacted, further narrowing what the local roles are. And so both of those FCC and state regulations limit the authority and the amount of time that the city has to act on things. So this kind of gives you a little graphic of the fact that the city is really the small piece of this pie as far as the regulatory control of these. They're regulated elsewhere primarily. So the oversight that the Federal Communications Commission has, you can see before you, they set rate setting, items to do with competition, public safety, homeland security, radio frequency emissions, and that one's a big item we keep hearing about. People are concerned about the RF frequencies that are out there and what impact they have, but those are all regulated by the FCC, and those are not items that the city has any control over. And then the FCC also sets specific timelines that limit our ability to act or take longer to act on requests. Going a little step further, state of North Carolina, you can see the general statute number there that currently controls what authority we have. This further reduces the timelines for review and sets what they refer to as shot clocks. And so those shot clocks give us a specific amount of time to respond to requests for these installations, which certainly makes things kind of difficult when we're trying to get through council approvals, just because of the nature of getting onto agendas and the time that takes. It also establishes very limited criteria for local denial. You have to have a very specific reason for denial that falls within those regulations. Limits fees for any installations, permit activities, and those types of things. Also delineates some requirements related to legislative versus administrative approval. Co-locations, for example, are administratively approved based on this regulation. So that's why we don't see the co-locations come to the city council, and we do see new poles. So the oversight that the city has, I've kind of broken up here in a formal and an informal. And the reason we've done that is because the providers so far have been willing to work with us on a few things that don't really fall into our formal authority. But local applicable codes, that specifically refers to things like mechanical, electrical, building codes, those type of things. I want to point out and make clear here that the UDO does not apply. It is specifically exempted. Land use codes are specifically exempted from having authority over these. Historic preservation has some authority. Public safety, so if they were to put a pole where it obstructed sight distance or those types of things, we have some authority there. Pole height, which is regulated, and then the size of the wireless equipment. And that wireless equipment that I'm referring to was those boxes that you saw on the side of the example poles earlier. They have a very specific volume that they must fit within. The informal, we've worked with the providers on pole colors and materials. They've worked very well with us on those, but again, these are things that aren't formal. They're just a very informal response from the community. Public outreach, they've worked with us on going out, talking to people, particularly when we see these in residential areas, those types of things. And then co-location options. And I mentioned co-locations earlier and the administrative approval that those go through, but we can't actually require them to co-locate. If the provider wants to install a new pole, they have the right to do so based on the FCC and the North Carolina State General Statute that gives that control. So we can suggest that they look at co-location options, and again, so far they've been pretty accommodating in looking at those things, but we can't require it. So going back to the administrative and city council roles, so administrative approvals, like I mentioned, co-locations, that's per state law. Those are required to go through administrative approval. And then if there were individual installations associated with a universal permit, like a utility license or a master encroachment agreement, which we don't currently have in place for small wireless facilities, but if we did, those would be things that would potentially go through administrative approval. And then city council approvals are any major encroachments not involving small cell co-locations. So new poles and those type of things currently still go to the city council, to this body for approval. So what that brings up is future opportunities. The encouragement of master encroachment agreements with the facility providers would be an option for things to look at for ways to get these items addressed. Improves predictability, efficiency, helps out with some of those shot clocks that are in the regulations, provides a clear picture of the cumulative impacts. It allows us to kind of look at them more holistically and allows some partnership in the considerations of how these facilities are installed. So our regulatory authority is limited significantly by the FCC and the general statute, but master encroachments give the opportunity for those things to be negotiated, and certain things could be written into those agreements that would allow those to move through an administrative approval with very clear and defined guidelines. And with that, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Thanks for that presentation. I had an opportunity to sit in on a meeting between an early installer of 5G small cell poles in one neighborhood where there was a lot of concern about the impact it would have. But at the end of the meeting, everybody was pretty much satisfied with what that provider was wanting to do, and had largely to do with co-locating this. And I'm assuming those co-locations are going to be on Duke Energy poles.
Primarily, that would be the case.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, and so everybody thought, okay, that's little or no impact because you're not putting another pole right in the middle of my front yard. But it sounded like the provider that's getting out there first is going to have the best opportunity to co-locate. And so what I can see coming is there will be other providers who also want to provide 5G, and they're going to, the one that we talked to said, no, we're not going to be interested in co-locating with any other competitor. So the question I have for you is, will there be an opportunity for competing providers to co-locate on the same Duke Energy pole?
The regulations do not currently allow us to require that.
Yeah.
So the way everything is written today, if there are multiple providers who want to go in the same locations, there are some specifications for some spacing in those regulations, but we cannot regulate that. So if one provider came in and co-located and a second provider wanted to go into the same location, they would be allowed under those rules to install a new pole with those facilities.
So is there any technical reason why they couldn't co-locate on the same pole?
I would have to defer to them on that. I don't know their technology well enough to answer that question.
Because, I mean, it was great the way this first wave of 5G poles was presented to this neighborhood, but the second wave and the third wave may not be as well received, so, okay.
Sometimes that has to do with their frequencies, the radio frequencies they're working on, the distance their poles have to be, that may prevent a co-location.
Okay, well, just so you guys get ready for the second wave here.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Manager?
Okay, so report of the city manager. There's 3 items on your agenda today. The first is just an update on our Impact Partner Grant Program out of Economic Development and Innovation. As you may recall, this is a program where we're forming stronger partnerships with entrepreneurship and small business in our community. Veronica Creech with Economic Development and Innovation is here to give you an update.
Good afternoon. Mayor, Council, what a pleasure it is to be here today and to share an update on the Impact Partner Grant Program. You'll remember you created the Innovation Fund. The team in the Office of Economic Development and Innovation, in consultation with many partners, outlined the Impact Partner Grant. Since kicking off in January of this year, the program has invested in 5 Raleigh-based organizations who collectively are supporting military veteran entrepreneurs, area youth innovators, underrepresented entrepreneurs, and workforce talent on the autism spectrum. By investing in these 5 organizations, your support is reaching more than 200 individuals and impacting more than 50 businesses right here at home. This video, coordinated by Amanda Driscoll in our office and in partnership with our City of Raleigh Communications team, showcases the program and highlights 2 of the impact partners. The second funding round is open through May 15th. So we welcome and invite you to share this program far and wide.
So the work that District C does, it can't happen all on its own just directly with students. It takes an ecosystem of support. So by building out that ecosystem and involving our students, our education, our local government, innovation hubs, you name it, business owners, it's allowing everyone to have a stake in this important work of preparing the next generation of talent.
But businesses seeing real ideas, real value, great thinking, new perspective, that is also what really drives, Kat, as you said, this idea of people feeling like they have a stake in it. That is direct value to the community.
The Impact Partner Grant Program benefits Raleigh's economy by investing in our innovators and our small businesses. As industry grows, as our economy grows, we want to be sure to stimulate innovation in our community.
The reason why Bunker Labs work is because we're inclusive of the community, because we feel the community is what benefits the veteran entrepreneurs the most, which is another reason the impact grant's great, because it's a whole cohort, and I think having that cohort of organizations in this ecosystem and having Bunker Labs and being able to connect our veterans to this, all the organizations that are part of that grant is going to be really key to their success and is a model for other communities across this state to emulate and a model for potentially communities in other cities across the country to emulate.
Small businesses and innovation fuel our economy by being a supply chain partner and an innovator with our larger companies.
What that initial money did too was it helped attract Google as a national sponsor. And Google has committed $75,000 on top of the city's grant, which is fantastic. And we're actually using that grant to run our first, it's going to be called Bunker Base Camp here at the loading dock in the city of Raleigh. So as you can see, what it did was it kind of was the spur that basically helped ignite the partnership with Google, which is the public-private partnerships, partner with organizations that are really good at what they do. So our focus, of course, is the veteran entrepreneurship. The city wanted the opportunity to, support veterans a lot more. It shows veterans across the country that Raleigh is very inclusive, very supportive of the veteran business community. In this state, there's 85,000 veteran-run businesses.
The organizations that benefit from the Impact Partner Grant are organizations that support and foster innovators and small businesses. Those groups that support or host boot camps, incubators, training sessions. These groups work with many innovators at one time. And if we support the partners, they support the businesses.
So they really go in well-equipped and well-prepared. And a wonderful example of that is we had a group of 7 of our students come back for a repeat experience with District C through an internship with another Impact Partner Grant recipient, Innovate Raleigh. Innovate Raleigh is looking to build an interactive online map for entrepreneurs who are either in this area or moving to this area, and they trusted our students to own that process from start to finish. So our students were working together, oftentimes virtually, with a team and checking in virtually with Innovate Raleigh to say, these are the types of information we think should be on this website. This is how we feel the website should flow. And in a couple weeks, that website will go live.
Good job. That's awesome. Do you work with the North Carolina, the Small Business and Technology Development Center?
We do.
Okay.
And can I tell you exactly what we do with them? But they're often a consultant of ours when we're looking at that ecosystem building. We're looking with all of our regional, because innovation is not just within our boundaries, it's regional.
Well, thank you.
Definitely great work, and I think that company has a great name.
Yeah.
Really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mayor and Council, next item is an update and ultimately a request for approval to look at exchanging some various maintenance and operating responsibilities between the City of Raleigh and North Carolina Department of Transportation. We do this review from time to time. In particular, this one has Hillsborough Street in it, so that makes it significant. Michael Moore from our Raleigh Department of Transportation is here to give you that update and ultimately ask for your approval.
Good afternoon. This can be very brief. As Mr. Hall said, we do go through a review from time to time with NCDOT and look at maintenance responsibilities and obligations throughout the city. We try to align where we have sort of some areas that logically don't fit any longer. There may be some spots where we have DOT responsibilities intermittent with city responsibilities and vice versa, some places where we have streets that were built with subdivisions that were once part of the county but now have been annexed into the city. We have some areas that, frankly, I can't tell you why they are segregated and cut up like they are, but we have some very short sections that just don't make any sense for it to be sort of parcelized the way it is. This is a way that we can pull together those maintenance obligations and provide better service to our citizens, create less frustrations when they call and say who is responsible for this particular piece of roadway. We're not pointing to NCDOT or us and then trying to figure it out. It's a way that we can be a little bit more consistent and a bit more logical. In this particular case, NCDOT wants to accept about 1.8 centerline miles of streets, a total of 6 streets. We will accept 10 streets, and as the city manager said, that includes Hillsborough Street. It also includes Blue Ridge Road, which is subject to a design project that we're underway with right now. Acceptance of Blue Ridge will allow us to maintain parking on the street that we would not be able to do were it still under the NCDOT control. So that's the better part of the acceptance that we're looking to do are those 2 streets. The assumption of that maintenance will be about $24,500 in cost to the city, which we will incorporate into future budgets. This is the list of streets that was included in your agenda materials. And I can go through those if you would like. But the request today is for you to adopt this resolution, creating this exchange. Our next step will be taking this to NCDOT. The North Carolina Board of Transportation will adopt a similar resolution, and then we'll update the system maps and put this into our work plans. So with that, I'm available to entertain any questions.
Anyone?
I have a question. Excuse me. I know the state will be taking over New Hope Road from New Bern Avenue to Corporate Parkway. I'm trying to understand where that. Hold on. Maybe I need to pull it up. I want to make sure I'm not thinking from New Bern Avenue to the 64.
So let me see if I can pull that up real quick in the.
There's individual maps.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
There's an attachment, different attachment.
Different attachment. Hold on.
So if we go to the street swap maps here.
Sorry about that. I just didn't see that street listed.
The problem with the PDF is it doesn't flow particularly well. So
I found it.
So it is this portion. On either side of this, the maintenance is DOT responsibility currently. So this is one of those areas where someone were to call us and say who's responsible for this, we would say we are, but we'd have to figure out exactly where along that alignment it would be. So this again helps create some clarity and some consistency.
Okay. All right. I know exactly. That's the part between the two shopping centers?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay, any other questions?
I move we adopt the resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
One thing I do want to say in closing, there will be a separate action required on Hillsborough Street if you want to permit outdoor dining going forward. That was a kind of a special carve-out that we had made with state roads. We'll have to bring a separate action back to council to permit that going forward, but I just want to be explicit about that.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Last item, Mayor and Council, on the manager's report is Raleigh Digital Connectors. This is actually now a relatively routine matter where we accept donations, in this case $10,000 from Google, in order to help fund this program. And occasionally it's been on consent, but what we wanted to do this time was just update you on it, but also really to recognize and support this outstanding program. It's one of our best, and Linda Jones is here to, I guess, remind you, but also the audience a little bit of some of the good work that we're doing. So we wanted to end with a cheerleading exercise. So, Linda, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Good evening to Mayor and the other council members. Thank you for this opportunity to come before you today to showcase the Raleigh Digital Connectors program. The mission of the program is to connect our community to the benefits of technology through leadership and service, while giving the participants, which are ages 14 to 15, the opportunity to develop professional life skills, participate in technology-centered projects, explore workplace pathways, and serve their communities. To give you a little bit of history of how we started the Digital Connectors program is that we received stimulus money in 2010. And the three goals to receiving that money is that it was to bring broadband access to over 1,500 underserved homes in Raleigh, start the Digital Connectors program, and promote resident digital literacy training. So in 2013, that grant ended, and the city saw fit to continue the program through general dollars and also donations. In 2018, we were fortunate enough to be transferred to Housing and Neighborhoods, and we moved the program from St. Monica Teen Center to the Raleigh Pathway Center. In 2013, we started our 12th program. Giving you a little bit about the program structure. Each cohort takes place for 9 months, September through May, which is the academic school year. They meet every Tuesday and Thursday from 5:30 to 8. We accept 15 students. And we do have a recruitment process similar to how we actually apply for a job. We have a panel, they have an application, we have a panel interview, and that panel interview is composed of our internal and external partners. They are rated and they are accepted. Based on the ratings that the panel gives them and meeting the criteria. They, for those 9 months, they are involved in 150 hours of classroom learning, 65 hours of service community projects, per student. And then we have a formal graduation at the end. The formal graduation is very nice. Most of you have attended, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for attending the graduations. In the past, we've had some of our city employees actually be the keynote speaker. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Marshall Adams Davis Douglas for being our keynote speaker this past May. And I don't think Chief Jet Brown is here, but she's also been part of our graduation keynote speaker. At the end of the program, with the formal graduation, they do receive a brand-new laptop computer and a $500 stipend. But it's amazing with the program, after the 9 months comes along, the students, they forget that they're getting a new computer, and they forget that they're getting $500. I always try to see if they can give that back to me, but that doesn't work. The accomplishments to date is we have graduated 163 graduates, refurbished 892 computers, trained over 3,400 residents, collective service hours, 8,000. Monetary service value of community service during the volunteer service formula is over $200,000. We also have an active alumni, and we have about 15 to 20 who have graduated from the program, and they still come back and they actually help participate in our program. They still conduct resident trainings with our community. We have been fortunate to be nationally recognized for this program for the City of Raleigh. In 2017, we received the Leaders in Digital Inclusion Award, and this was submitted to us from the Next Century Cities and also Google Fiber. And in 2019, we were recognized as another Leaders in Digital Inclusion Best Practice from Broadband Now, as naming us as Digital Inclusion Trailblazer City. And tomorrow, the Digital Connectors program will be featured. I was serving on a panel of the Smarter City Summit, and I've been invited by our IT department to participate there. The sustainability of the program. The City of Raleigh has sustained the program through strategic partners. Both internal city departments and external companies and organizations have contributed to our success. Of course, we could not have done this alone. And so here we want to just give you a few of our partnering organizations that we have worked with. Google Fiber to date has given us $55,000, and we greatly appreciate that. AT&T has given us over $40,000. These are some of the other partners that we work with. In the previous presentation, working with Innovate Raleigh, our students actually attend and participate in those sessions. And then we have our internal partners that we rely on heavily: IT, Parks and Recreation and Cultural Resources, and our Raleigh Police Department. So currently, we are in our 12th program, and we started that September the 17th. It will conclude in May, and we have an engaged and passionate group. When we look at the selection process, we look at their strengths and weaknesses and how they will build a socialization and share knowledge with each other. So that helps us to build a diverse participant representation throughout the City of Raleigh. Again, we have an active alumni program. Our students actually present presentations, and they led a session at our Raleigh Neighborhood Exchange. And we continue our digital literacy efforts. One of the major efforts that we did is work with the Raleigh Housing Authority when Walnut Terrace was built. And we went there and we actually taught the residents there on computer skills. And we also serve as a member of the North Carolina Digital Equity Collaborative, which is composed of the State Broadband Office here in Raleigh. So I just would like to give you this statement just to really conclude what the power of this program does. Overall, the work of the Digital Connectors helps increase technology adoption, provides greater opportunity for community engagement through technology, and encourages socialization between students and the community. Through the access, education, and awareness and information, Digital Connectors are building a culture that values technology and embraces it to enhance lives. Which leads me to my last slide. Which leads me to our last slide. Jessica, these are her words. She just graduated from the program in 2019, and she is a current freshman at Stanford University. My favorite memory in training the foster grandparents on digital literacy. I've never thought about how technology can make people's lives easier until I met these women. Thanks to this program, I have learned career development skills that aided me in my college acceptance to 8 universities. She did chose Stanford. I spoke with her actually last week, which is one thing that we try to do is to stay in contact with our digital connectors. And she was actually featured in her acceptance letter for her involvement in digital connectors. So we're very, very proud of Jessica and all of our other alumni. So with that, I said that I can't do it alone. I do want to give you the main face of Digital Connectors, and that would be Mr. Bradley Upchurch, if you would come up. I'd like to formally introduce you to Bradley Upchurch. Most of you know him, but for those that do not, he is our Digital Inclusion Program Manager, and he has taught all 12 classes that we've had since starting the program since 2010. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to Bradley for thanking you publicly and say, thank you for everything you do. He helps enhance the curriculum. He meets with them on Tuesday and Thursdays. He teaches them. He creates the partnerships that I just listed for you. So I just want to make sure that you get your credit as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Bradley.
Thank you very much.
So that concludes my presentation for council today.
Awesome. Any questions?
One
Oh.
question. On average, how many applicants do we receive?
On average, we receive between 80 and 100.
800. So that leads me to my next thing. I see we only do about 15 per. So I'm going to ask for a budget note to see what we can do to double the number of applicants in this program to at least 30.
Sounds good. All right,
So,
we can do that.
All right.
all right.
Thank you so kindly.
you.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mayor, we would appreciate approval of the acceptance
Donation.
of the donation.
I move for approval of the budget amendment amount of $10,000 for Digital Connect program.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
move to request petitions of citizens. We have Mac Paul, representing Rex Hospital.
Good afternoon. Mac Paul, 421 Fayetteville Street, here making a request to be able to file a zoning text change. As background, you may remember last year, about the same time, UNC Rex, and I'm here on behalf of UNC Rex, filed a rezoning, and it was approved, I believe, in September of 2018 to prepare for the future expansion of the hospital on 27 acres bounded by Blue Ridge Road, Edwards Mill, and Macon Pond. So right across from the hospital, there's parking there now. And one of the issues we worked through during that time with knowing that they were going to come in with an outpatient cancer center was on frontage, because it's such a large site, the configuration of the streets, we work with staff. But due to some restrictions in the UDO, we ended up putting the frontage in a zoning condition, which is what we'd like to pursue the text change on. Now, months later, we're in site plan and we're finding a number of problems with the frontage because it is in a condition. We're now not allowed to get a variance or an administrative adjustment, which would be the normal kind of relief valve to accommodate the specifics of the site. So they're really in danger of falling well behind schedule on this cancer center. So we would respectfully ask your approval to be able to file it and start that process.
Okay.
This is in my district, and I've talked to several folks about it, and it seems to me like a reasonable thing, so I move that we accept the request.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to matters scheduled for public hearing. The first item is public nuisance abatement. I will read the addresses. If you are here for a specific case, please raise your hand and indicate, and Mayor Pro Tem Branch will watch out for you. I'll open the hearing. The first item is 2808 Barwell Road, 1522 Eva May Drive, 1523 Eva May Drive, 1909 Hadley Road, 524 Marble Street, 7260 Mine Shaft Road, and 2208 Sanderford Road. Is there anyone here to speak to any of those items? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. Do I have a motion to approve adoption of the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we have rezoning Z715. My understanding is this is a continuation of a public hearing for an item that is in transportation.
That's exactly right.
So I believe the applicant is here if you wanted to have any conversation with them. But we had calendared this for Transportation and Transit, and that meeting did not occur because of a lack of quorum. And so I think the committee still wishes to discuss the item. Is that right?
I definitely want to keep it in committee and ask that we can hold this until November 6th during the day
We'll
session.
leave the hearing open.
And leave the hearing open.
Continue
We'll leave
until.
the hearing open. The hearing is open. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak to it because it was calendared today? It's up to you. You can. It's going to be taken up in committee, so we're not making any decisions today. It's going back to committee.
Amanda Mann, Morningstar Law Group, 421 Fayetteville Street. We appreciate being heard in committee. We've been working to address the questions that came up with respect to traffic, and so we're still working on it.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, we'll send this back to the Transportation Committee and continue the hearing. Okay, next we have rezoning Z1019, 1415 and 1419 South Bloodworth Street.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. This is a new public hearing today. So this is located south of downtown. You can see the site is currently zoned heavy industrial. It's about a little bit more than 2 acres, 2.18 acres. Heavy industrial zoning right now, requesting to go to industrial mixed use with a 5-story height and conditions. It is inconsistent with the future land use map, but consistent with the plan overall. The South Central CAC voted in support, and so did the Planning Commission. And you can see we're just south of the South Park NCOD here and surrounded on all sides by IX zoning already. So that's the same base district that they're requesting here. And we're between Garner and Hammond, south of Hoke. So I mentioned this already. We'll just move right ahead to this aerial. And you can see we're south of downtown, several blocks south of MLK, and on the east side of Wilmington here.
Okay.
So the site currently has a warehouse and the land is disturbed, but not fully developed. A couple of views of the site from each corner. So this one is looking, the first view is looking to the northwest from the south side of the site. The second view also looking to the north from the south side of the site. And then a view of the warehouse that's currently on the site looking from the north towards the south. The condition proposed here is to prohibit adult establishments and pawn shops. That's the only condition offered. And the residential entitlement goes up significantly here. The setbacks go down significantly. So heavy industrial has a pretty significant setback requirement. And so when you go to a mixed-use district, you have a less significant setback. I also just want to mention that because of the change in height request, the total gross square footage is going to go up from about 157,000 square feet, and this is all in your packet, but I just want to make sure I had called this to your attention, would increase to about 350,000 square feet, and then the office entitlement would go up from about 68,000 to about 91,000. There's no retail allowed currently, and so there would be retail entitlement here, about 72,000, and the total industrial allowed square footage would go up from about 187,000 to about 350,000. All of those numbers are, if you kind of single-shotted that particular use, right, not a combination of uses. So a pretty significant increase in entitlement because of the height increase that they're asking for. There's no urban form designation here. Again, not consistent with the future land use map. You'll remember that this entire area is currently zoned industrial mixed use, but the future land use map here shows general industrial and office and residential mixed use. So a little bit of a disconnect in terms of what the future land use map envisions and what's currently on the ground. Consistent with the plan overall, even though it is inconsistent with the future land use map. A handful of consistent policies, and the inconsistent policies are tied to that future land use map for the most part, and the expectation about retail use in this particular land use category. So the South Central CAC does recommend approval, as does the Planning Commission, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the case.
So our background says the South Central vote was 7-2.
Right, and then it says a different number here. On the first slide, it said the 7-2 as well. I believe that 7-2 is probably correct.
I thought the 2 was abstentions.
Abstentions, yes.
Okay, so
7-0, but
okay,
2
7-0,
abstentions.
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
So yeah,
Okay.
it's just 7-2. Okay.
Thank you. Any questions before we open the hearing? Okay, we'll open the hearing. Just want to remind everyone, in a rezoning, we do allow 8 minutes per side. So I'm assuming you're in favor of this zoning case.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. Michael Birch with Longleaf Law Partners here on behalf of the current owner, James Goodnight, who in addition to these 2 properties also owns the 2 properties to the north as well. Provide a little context for the area. Right now, Slingshot Coffee has their production in the kind of northernmost property there. And then north of that is where Brewery Bavana has some production operations, and then also Anchor Light is there, and that's kind of a community-oriented space for creatives and artists. And so the vision for these properties, given that Slingshot already has some production there on site, is to kind of continue that proof of concept that exists to the north, but to carry that south. And to also allow for some vertical mix of uses with residential. You'll notice these 2 properties are currently zoned heavy industrial, and that is a result of past use on this site, the Ashland Chemical site, which resulted in contamination of the property. So as a part of redevelopment, the owner will have to go through a remediation process for that. Again, request is for industrial mixed use, IX, which is consistent and compatible with the base district, kind of all of surrounding this property. Just by rezoning from IH to IX, a lot of those more noxious, incompatible uses are being prohibited. From a policy standpoint, Bynum mentioned that we are inconsistent, and it's because this area, even though it's zoned IX, is future land use map for office residential mixed use. But I would say big picture, the future land use map calls for a mix of commercial and residential, which we're trying to accomplish here, but also balance the uses that are permitted around us as well from that kind of creative makerspace production uses. Would also note that this area is in close proximity to planned bus rapid transit routes. We are within about a quarter-mile walk to local bus service at Bloodworth and Bragg to the north. And then this area is targeted for higher levels of bus service by the 2016 Wake Transit Plan. And even though this property is just outside the South Park area plan, I'll note that it's very close to the area identified as kind of the commercial focus area of South Park, and so we envision this much as a continuation of the planned commercial in that area as you're coming southeast. Also, from a policy standpoint, this is within one of the city's economic development target areas, which encourages investment and redevelopment of the area. So won't reiterate what Bynum mentioned in terms of the South CAC vote, but I do want to note that at the request of the South Central CAC chair, since South Park neighborhood is in the Central CAC, we went and gave a courtesy presentation to the Central CAC since South Park is in Central, and we received positive feedback there. But since we weren't in the CAC, they didn't take a vote, but we did go present there. And that was prior to the South Central taking a vote. They wanted to receive the feedback from Central and then base their vote on that, and that resulted in the 7 in favor and 0 opposed. Again, we're consistent with the comprehensive plan, and we think we're reasonable in the public interest because we're eliminating some of those noxious uses, incompatible uses, but preserving the type of commercial that's in the area and allowing for some vertical mix of uses. So happy to answer any questions that council has.
Okay, does anyone have any questions before we?
No, you
Okay.
answered my question already.
Okay, great. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak in support of this item? Is there anyone else, is there anyone that wants to speak in opposition to this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the hearing.
I'm move for approval.
Second.
Consistency statement.
I move for approval to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated October 15th of 2019 containing the agenda material and to approve the zoning amendment.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, next we have Z1119, 510 Grove Avenue.
This is about half an acre on Grove Avenue. The request is to rezone from R6, which is 6 units per acre with the special residential parking overlay district, to R10 with similar overlay. It is consistent with the future land use map here, which is moderate density residential, and it's consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. The CIC is not in favor, but the Planning Commission did vote in favor. And you can see here the parcel is, there are a number of larger half acre or more parcels south of here, but to the north, east, and west, smaller parcels, and everything in this area has the special residential parking overlay, and it is generally R6. Which is what I just said. All right. So we're on the south side of Western Boulevard, west of downtown, west of NC State University, headed out towards Cary. And again, low density, mostly surrounding this, and moderate density to the north. So a couple of views on Grove Avenue. The view looking north along the street and also south along the street. You can see the existing structure that's there. So they have converted to a conditional use case late in the process and have a handful of conditions that they have offered. They are prohibiting apartments. They are limiting building height. They have specified that an open space would be provided, and they have specified some building materials. And also a handful of conditions around building materials. And then they have also specified a setback from Grove Avenue that puts them in keeping with kind of existing setback in the neighborhood. So the change here is a increase in entitlement from 3 to 5 units, and the front setback again would be that 20 feet specified by the condition, but otherwise the setbacks are not changing. It is consistent with the moderate residential designation on the future land use map, which would suggest up to 14 units per acre. And it is consistent with the plan overall. Inconsistent with the conservation of single-family neighborhoods policy, just in that it would be a removal of an existing structure. The Planning Commission does recommend approval, but the West CAC does not. And there's no future land use map change required here, since it's consistent. Can I answer questions for you about this case?
Do we have any questions before we open the hearing? Okay, thank you. We'll open the hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to support of this case? Come on down.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm Jerry Dickinson. I own with my sisters a house on Powell Drive, 618 Powell Drive. We have looked at several ways of improving that building and improving the piece of property that we own, which is near this one that's under consideration. The cheapest thing we could do is bulldoze it and build another house. The building was built in '47. Most of the houses from the west side of Powell Drive all the way to the west side of Carolina Avenue, which encompasses the area that's under construction, was built about the same time, with the exception of a few areas that have most recently been, quote, bulldozed and rebuilt. Some of those houses are being done very nicely, and I would like to see the council consider rezoning that entire area from the west side of Powell Drive to the west side of Carolina Avenue, from Scarlet Maple, which was probably rezoned. They've got condos there, from there to Western Boulevard. If any of you are familiar with Grove Avenue, the area is in a terrible state of decay. And the economics simply will not support continuing with the present zoning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak in support of this case? Okay, is there anyone here that wishes to speak in opposition to this case?
Hi, I'm Allison Shackelford. I live on Carolina Avenue, which is a street below Grove Avenue. And I'm not really in opposition to this. However, the drainage issue is of prime concern to me and to my neighbors. Ever since Grove Avenue was first paved back in, I think, the early 70s or late 60s, that drainage issue has been a very bad problem. There is a lot of new construction going on right now on Grove Avenue, and we have met with the builder, the developer who has been doing that, about the drainage issue, because since that construction has started, the wash and the sediment that has been coming down, or the silt that has been coming down into our private property, has been tremendous. It's also producing a lot of erosion. I met with Chris Bridgers, who is a he's with Stormwater Inspections, Sediment and Erosion Control. And he assessed our area, and he said his recommendations were to contact the stormwater drainage and tell them that he had assessed the area, and that we need to look at the problem, which is not just our area. It actually starts higher up on Heather, and it comes down. And what we're having is an issue of public drainage coming onto private property. So it goes down into what is called Simmons Branch Creek, which is on the other side of Carolina Avenue, and you can see the tremendous erosion that has happened there as well. So our concern with this new construction is that the drainage issue is addressed.
Okay.
It is a primary issue with us. I think that's pretty much it. My neighbor is here. She's got some pictures. We did not prepare it electronically, but she's got some pictures she can show you, and she can address what's going on her property. After Hurricane Fran came through, we had extensive drainage work done on our private property, and I have a creek or a riprap ditch in my yard to handle this, and I have a culvert, which is probably the only one in that area that is handled. It is a size to handle the amount of drainage and wash that's coming through all the properties there. The amount of silt that has accumulated in my ditch now is unbelievable. I mean, we get this red river coming through now. And again, the developer has been he has met with us, and he has been very, very concerned with it, and he is easy to work with. And we've met with the developer that is wanting to do this new piece of property as well. And he seems willing to work with us about that. But this is a primary concern to us, and I will continue to follow up with this.
Okay.
And my neighbor is here.
Excuse me, could I get her last name and address? I'm sorry.
Sure. My last name is Shackelford, Shackelford. The address is 515 Carolina Avenue. My mother's name is actually on the property deed. Her name is Betsy Smith.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Hi. I'm probably going to be a little bit more nervous. She's a better speaker, but I'm at 511 Carolina Avenue. I am directly behind the property.
What was your name again?
Diane Bell.
Okay.
My husband is Christopher with a K. He is also on the property deed. But our property is directly behind 510 Grove, and there is a drain that lets out right towards the end of their property and onto our property, and it's extremely disturbing. Over the years, it has just gotten worse and worse as there's been development. Impermeable surfaces have been laid down. When they talk about going from 3 to 5 buildings on that property behind us, that just raises the impermeable surfaces, and the drainage will just get worse. I mean, I don't know if you can pass these around, but
Yes,
I
if
mean,
you
it's-
give it to the clerk,
it's
she'll pass it around.
insane, the amount of water that comes through the property. It goes right into my property, and it comes out through to
Yeah.
Allison's. I had video, those pictures are actually taken from a video. I wasn't aware of how, the electronics worked here, that I would have been able to do that, so I apologize for that. But, and already they are working on the property. They are raising up the land up to the second floor. So when they say that they're only going to raise it up 35 feet, I have pictures where they have for days and days and days, they have had truckloads of fill put in. So that raises it even higher to my property. So it effectively adds another story to their property. And I don't know if you can see in some of these pictures. We can see what it was before. This is looking from my property onto their property. And this is looking from, you can see not my property, but the next property next door, looking from the grove down towards our property. And not only is the storm drain a problem, I believe in one of those pictures you should be able to see one of those green battens that they put in the sewer drain to kind of hold back the construction debris coming down. It went down the pipe with it. Now, you laugh, but that's the same size as maybe a 10-year-old child being swept down that, which is really frightening. And we have had animals come down that pipe into our yard just for them to be left in our yard. It's very upsetting. It's upsetting to my children over the years to try to get out there before them. And it's just getting worse and worse. And if this construction has to be very carefully considered of the area. Again, part of it's the city's fault, if you want to put a fault, and something needs to be done. But I think 5 buildings is going to be too much. 3 is plenty. We've got to have permeable surfaces. It can't get any worse than it is now, or, I'll have to be building an ark in my own property, and that's not right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you
I
very much.
appreciate it.
Okay, is there anyone else here that wishes to speak in opposition to this case? Okay.
I do want to say that I don't believe the applicant is here today. So I just, as far as I can tell, there's no one here to represent this case.
Because I'm not sure about the rest of the council, but I think we need to have a discussion of stormwater retention conditions before we do anything with this. So let's just keep the
Hearing open.
hearing open and maybe bring it back as a special item in 2 weeks.
I'd be happy to do that.
Or 4 weeks.
3.
Whatever. Yeah, that's right.
If you're going to leave the hearing open, we
Open.
would bring it back at a certain time under
November 6th.
public hearings.
Right. We'll bring it back November 6th.
During the
That's
day.
going to put it on the evening agenda,
Oh.
just because the public hearings are in the evening, just so you remember.
I know we already got like 100 things on the evening agenda, so.
You could choose to place it on the afternoon agenda, just direct us to do that for November 6th.
I would put it on the afternoon agenda under special items.
I agree.
Everybody okay with that, and inform the,
So are we going to ask staff to bring back some recommendations on how to mitigate these impacts?
that would be really helpful.
Because otherwise, we
Yeah.
need something to work on.
Yeah, and maybe Chris could come since he's the one that sounds like he was out there.
I'd also like for the applicant to be here.
Right.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So the afternoon session.
So it's going to come back
6th.
to our next meeting, which is November 6th. You don't have to be here because we've heard, you're welcome to come back if you want. But we need the applicant here because we need to be able to talk to them about what kind of stormwater control conditions they're going to put on if we decide to approve it. Clearly, they've got to do something about the stormwater control.
So, and Madam Mayor, it's hard to tell from this information, but we might ask staff to say, are there some other conditions here that need to be mitigated so that we don't, some existing conditions are bad and unsafe that need to be corrected as well?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the rezoning case.
Right.
Perhaps we could ask Stormwater to provide a report as backup on the item when we bring it back on November 6th.
Could you include what they addressed about truckloads of dirt being brought in and changing the elevation of the property as well? And as how it relates to the stormwater problem?
We will report what we know.
Okay.
Is what I would suggest.
I mean, the pictures are pretty
He can offer a condition that
impressive. I mean, I don't know how that tree's gonna live. But, yeah, if we can address that too, it'd be great. Or you can pass that on to the applicant.
Mayor, the other suggestion is we'll create a category for public hearings on the November 6th instead of it being listed as a special item since it's still a continuation of the public hearing.
Okay, that'd be great.
I'm confused.
It's going to come November 6th during the day in public hearings. We're going to continue the public hearing during the day, meeting on November 6th.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. Okay, thank you.
Is there anything that we need to provide for you by that time?
No, I
You need
mean,
to
you've
follow up
provided
with-
a lot, and we're asking staff to follow up with a report on the existing stormwater problems, some suggestions about if this rezoning
And
is.
if staff has any questions or anything they need from you, they'll contact you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and if staff produces a report that goes out onto board docs, it might be an opportunity for you to
Share it.
preview it so that they have any new questions, they can be prepared to ask them.
We'll make a connection. We'll
Okay.
follow up.
I'd
Absolutely.
like to see the
Weeks enough
report.
time.
We will follow up with you.
Okay.
Staff,
Do I need to
stormwater
give
file. I'm
my
looking,
information to anyone?
Actually, here, turn around and look that way. See that guy?
I do.
That's Wayne Miles. Yeah, so why don't you guys talk? How about that? There you go.
Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just want to say thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure, you're welcome. Okay, next is text change TC 819, mechanical and plumbing examining boards and housing appeals boards. Okay.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
This is a text change that would dissolve the Housing Appeals Board, and any appeals that would have gone to that board would now be going before the Board of Adjustment. It would also dissolve the mechanical and plumbing examining boards. This came from the Housing Appeals Board was established to hear appeals from decisions made by the city's inspectors tasked with determining whether dwellings meet the city's minimum housing standards for human habitation. This board has not heard a case since 2013. The council felt shifting this responsibility to the BOA would create an efficiency and reduce a burden on staffing of a board that rarely meets. The plumbing and mechanical examining boards and licensing were established in 1959 by the city to fill a void that existed at the time when the state was licensing journeyman level construction trades supervisors. In 2016, the state of North Carolina began licensing these journeymen, and the need for this board no longer existed. This is pretty simple, straightforward. We're eliminating these two boards because they rarely meet. Any appeals will be heard by the BOA on apparently the off chance that we receive one. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions? We open the hearing? Okay, thank you. We'll open the hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to text change TC 819? Okay, seeing no one, we will close the hearing. Do I have a motion?
I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated October 15th, 2019, containing the agenda material, and to approve the zoning text amendment.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, next we have text change TC 1119, shopping centers.
Okay, this is a text change that would create a use classification and specific parking standards for shopping centers. The parking requirements are specified by use on the property and are typically expressed as a ratio of required parking to the floor area within a building. The example shown here is an office building would require one space for every 400 square feet of floor area of a building. The parking requirements kick in when a tenant changes within a shopping center, and these have over time become a bit of an issue. If the parking requirement increases by 10 spaces or 10%, whichever is less, the applicant would have to go through the site plan process. This means that the city would ask for and require public improvements for the entire shopping center. So this can place a burden on some of these tenants, particularly our smaller tenants, and they need to, going into a space, and it kicks in that requirement for improvements with the increase of just 10 spaces or 10%. This change would create a classification and use standards for shopping centers. They would be permitted within CX, NX, DX, IX, and CMP districts. We would set a parking ratio between the current retail standard, which is 1 for every 300 square feet, and the office standard, which is 1 for every 400. The proposed ratio would be 1 vehicle per every 350 square feet of floor area. A shopping center's definition would be incorporated into this text change. It would be defined as a planned unified development. It contains at least 3 establishments with commercial or recreational uses and contains at least 25,000 square feet of gross floor area on a land area of at least 2 1/2 acres in size. This may look familiar because it was the definition that is in sync with what used to be in the code. The standards would be that a shopping center would have to contain at least 3 establishments. Again, the minimum of 1 of those being commercial or recreational. And the shopping center may contain more than 1 lot and other uses permitted within that applicable zoning district. Shopping centers must contain at least 25,000 square feet of gross floor area on the land area of at least 2 1/2 acres in size. Again, this would be something that would give tenant change-out relief from having to file a site plan, which can be a lengthy process in its own right. So this would relieve that burden. Staff is available for any questions.
What happens if there are fewer than 3 establishments? They still have that burden of the...
Well, it would not be classified as a shopping center. So that technically that requirement, the existing requirement would still be there for them.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions before we open the hearing? Okay, we will open the hearing. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak to text change TC 1119?
Again, good afternoon. Michael Birch with Longleaf Law Partners. Just here on behalf of myself, and would just strongly encourage the council to adopt this text change. It is extremely needed. I think it's been quite a burden on staff from a processing of ASR standpoint, and certainly for community tenants trying to change and owners of shopping centers. The one thing I would strongly encourage the council to do also is to reduce or eliminate the acreage requirement in the definition of shopping center, which is currently 2.5 acres in size. I think the 25,000 square feet of floor area is appropriate. I think that is a critical mass of uses. There's a requirement for a mix of uses that justifies this kind of shared parking rate. But I think the 2.5 acres in size, I think what I heard from Mr. Holland was we're kind of just bringing forward what was in the old legacy zoning ordinance, and I think that comes from a time very different than what we're dealing with today in terms of how sites are being developed and how smaller sites are being developed. And so that 2.5 acre limitation really excludes a lot of commercial properties in the downtown edge area that would be, continue to be impacted by this requirement for ASR with a change of use. So, reducing it to 2 acres would be extremely helpful. I think eliminating the requirement altogether and really focusing on the floor area, the 25,000 square feet, would be even better.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Well,
Hey,
Well, I got a question for staff, and that is, and maybe Michael, did that come up in discussions with staff about putting together this text change, about eliminating the acreage requirement?
It did not. The eliminating acreage did not come up. This was simply the number that was used in the former code.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak in support of this item? Is there anyone here that wishes to speak in opposition to this item? Okay, seeing none, we will close the hearing.
Well, I agree with the idea of focusing on the square footage and not on the acreage, so I think that makes some sense. So
That's not in this text change. This text change is about parking requirements.
So the question is, if we wanted to accommodate that, how would we do it?
We'd probably have to do another one because that wasn't advertised in, that wasn't advertised in this text change.
No, the definition of shopping center is part of the text change, and the shopping center is defined as planned unit development with at least 25,000 square feet on at least 2.5 acres. And so I think a change can be made to the proposed text change to eliminate the last portion of that sentence. And my understanding is, that change to the text change is not something that would need to be re-noticed or brought forward in a different text change.
Well,
I agree with Mr. Birch. He actually alerted me to this several hours ago, so I was able to do some research. And in a text change, as opposed to a rezoning, you can change the language of the text change without having to renotice it.
Mr. Bowers, how do you feel about
Everybody
this
wants a little
last-minute
piece of the
request?
action here.
I feel grossly underinformed.
I was just conferring with Mr. Holland, and I believe that we understand that this would be simply striking a phrase from the definition so that the definition would simply define, the use standard would simply be a minimum of 25,000 square feet, period. And I believe we have enough understanding of that request for us to make that amendment, if you wish to make it at the table.
Well, and I would just add, even though you're not required, you have, the ability to get more time if you want to. I'm saying I don't think you need to renotice it in the newspaper.
Well, I like the idea, but I also like the idea of waiting a little bit of time to see if some other voices come forward and say, here's something you didn't think of here, since it's just popped up at the table. So I like it, but I'd also like to make sure that we're letting everyone who needs to have some input on this have it before we vote.
So are you asking for this to be held to November 6th for the afternoon session?
Yes.
I'm actually quite comfortable moving forward today for whatever it's worth, so.
I am too, but
Moving forward with taking out the 2.5 acre minimum and focusing just on the 25,000 square feet being a shopping center. I think we've got quite a few current and upcoming shopping centers that would fall under that 25,000 but not meet the 2.5 acre minimum, and I think it gets us to what we need.
Yeah, and I agree. I just, again, November 6th is, I don't think, since
A
it
very
just.
full agenda.
Well, but I also think it's going to be no contest, and we'll move on. Since wasn't noticed this way, that we just give them a little time for someone to say, how does that really impact a circumstance we hadn't thought about yet?
I'd agree. I'd like to hold it to him.
Okay, so if there's no objection, we will bring this back as is this a continued public hearing?
We can
Or
actually,
we can close the hearing, or,
if we were to make that
If we
change,
close the hearing, then we can't hear any other points of view.
all right, we'll bring it back as a continued public hearing, just like we did the other one. Okay, thanks. Okay, that takes us to committee reports. Economic Development Innovation has no report and no pending items, so Growth and Natural Resources, looks like there's no report, and I do not know about their...
Our next meeting will be tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock chamber.
Okay, there you go. Healthy Neighborhoods,
No report, just an announcement that our next committee meeting will be on Tuesday, October 22nd at 4 p.m. in the council chamber.
okay? And Transportation and Transit.
no report. Our next meeting will be October 22nd in 305 at 3 o'clock, and we will be discussing all items that are pending.
Okay. That takes us to report of mayor and council. Mr. Cox.
No report.
Okay. Ms. Stewart, sorry.
No report.
Okay, Mr. Stevenson.
Well, I guess just a brief report. I want to congratulate all the incumbents who are going to be returning, and likewise congratulate all the new councilors who were elected on October 8th.
Okay. Mr. Branch.
I do have 3 items. The first one is, can I have transportation to look at the intersection of Wilmington and Hargett Street? When pedestrians are trying to cross the street from the bank towards the restaurants, there's been a lot of challenges with oncoming traffic trying to make a turn either left or right onto Wilmington Street off of Hargett. If there's something we can do to look at that light signalization to give pedestrians a chance to kind of get across and work with the light crossing as well. Secondly, there is a dedication at Washington Terrace on October the 19th. Please, those that are available, please come out. It is actually scheduled at, let me make sure I get the right time, 11 a.m. on the 19th, dedicating and there was a conversation, and I know staff is already working on this, but I know there's a conversation dealing with the Heritage Plaza at Chavis, so if we can just get a report back to staff, back to council on where we are with that conversation. And that's all I have.
Okay. I have a couple things. One, I wanted to announce that I've appointed Eric Braun to the Raleigh Housing Authority, so thank you very much, Eric, for agreeing to do that. I also, your right to free speech in any way, but I think when people come before our boards and commissions, especially the Planning Commission, they have the right to a fair hearing, and I think that it is an implied bias if you use your position on the Planning Commission or any boards or commission to promote a specific candidate. So if the city attorney would consider bringing some language back for us to consider in that matter, I'd appreciate it. And then the last item is the swearing-in ceremony for the new council will be Monday, December 2nd at Raleigh Union Station from 6 to 8 p.m. Okay, Mr. Thompson?
Yes, ma'am. So just wanted to remind everybody that later this week, the state fair opens up. I hope you all go out and have some fun now.
Okay. Yes, sir. Okay.
Just one thing, we have an ad hoc committee on employee compensation, and our next meeting is October 24th at 2 o'clock in room 305.
Okay, we'll move to appointments.
Madam, I actually have a conflict with work on that day now. That came up, so I will not be able to make it.
Okay, well, I'll check and make sure we have a quorum, and if we don't, we'll change that. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Madam Clerk, appointments?
First item, Appearance Commission, and no matter what the ballot says, there are 3 vacancies rather than 2, but there are no nominees. Civil Service Commission, 1 vacancy, no nominees. DHIC, you have 2 vacancies. Jordan Manis received 7 votes, so would be appointed. Ithaca Kaysen received 4 votes, so that'll be carried over. Historic Cemeteries Advisory Board, you have 2 vacancies, no nominees. Historic Resources and Museums Advisory Board, you have 1 vacancy. Councilor Mendel nominated Clara Gadet. Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority, you have 1 vacancy. Nancy received 3 votes, Seppi 4, that'll be carried over. Raleigh Transit Authority, 1 vacancy, alternate member, Crash Craig received 2 votes, that'll be carried over. Sister Cities, 2 vacancies, David Kilbride received 7 votes, so would be appointed. Stormwater Management Advisory Commission, 1 vacancy, Glenn Taylor received 5 votes, so would be appointed. Nominations, let's see. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission.
I'd like to nominate Vincent Whitehurst. I think he's already submitted some paperwork.
Say the name again.
Vincent Whitehurst.
For bike bed?
For bike ped?
Yep.
Okay, so Susan Hatchell term is expiring, and she is eligible for reappointment and would like to be considered.
Okay, well, so 1 vacancy is not really 1 vacancy.
Right.
Okay, all right.
So are you,
Well, I think we should reappoint Susan.
Reappoint, okay.
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
the second Environmental Advisory Board, you have 1 vacancy. The term of Graham Smith is expiring. He is eligible for reappointment as far as length of service and would like to be considered.
Okay. Do I have a motion to?
Move to reappoint Graham Smith.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
The next is the Raleigh Convention and Visitors Bureau. No, that's not what it's called. The Raleigh Convention and Performing Arts Centers Authority, you have 1 vacancy. The term of John Odom is expiring. He is eligible for reappointment and would like to be considered. You have his attendance record.
I move to reappoint.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
The next is the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission. The term of Jonathan Page is expiring. He is eligible and would like to be considered, and you do have his attendance record.
Move to reappoint.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
And that's it.
okay. Madam Attorney?
Have nothing.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
You received minutes of the October 1 meetings.
Move for approval of minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, a motion is in order to enter closed session pursuant to GS 143-318.11A3 to consult with the city attorney to preserve the attorney-client privilege and to give instructions concerning the handling and/or settlement of a potential claim, including 1, Hand of Hope Pregnancy Resource Center versus the City of Raleigh, and 2, in regards to national prescription opiates litigation, and GS 143-318.11.4 to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries, and GS 143-318.11A6 to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of a public, individual public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll move to closed session. Thank you.
closed session, and I'll just give this to you when I'm done. Where we consulted with the attorney regarding the handling of a potential claim regarding 2 items, Hand of Hope Pregnancy Resource Center versus the City of Raleigh and National Prescription Opioids litigation. We discussed matters relating to the location or expansion of industries and discussed the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, and/or conditions of initial employment of an individual public officer or employee or prospective public officer. Meeting is adjourned.